What does it feel like to be erased? Not just from a job, but from a legacy you've poured 15 years into, a company your father built from a single office in Chicago's South Loop? I was about to find out. The quarterly sales data flickered on my screen, numbers I'd wrestled into shape through late nights and quiet compromises, when the door to my office swung open with a force that rattled the frame. Martin Ree, my boss, stood there, his silhouette filling the doorway, a file clutched in his hand like a weapon. No knock, no courtesy, just a deliberate entrance meant to unsettle. I looked up, steadying my breath, and met his eyes. Something told me this wasn't about the numbers. "Bennett!" he barked, tossing the file onto my desk with a thud that scattered my neatly arranged pens. "We need to talk, now." His voice carried that familiar edge, the one he used to command boardrooms or silence dissent. Martin was the kind of man who thrived on power, who liked reminding everyone he held it. I'd worked under him for 4 years, navigating his ego with the precision of a tightrope walker. I glanced at the folder, its contents hidden, then back at him. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. He didn't sit. Instead, he loomed, his shadow stretching across my desk like a storm cloud. "The board's decided to restructure the leadership team," he said, his tone clipped, rehearsed. "We're moving in a new direction, and we need people who can lead, not just crunch numbers." I blinked, the words sinking in slowly, like a blade through fabric. "You're firing me?" I asked, my voice calm despite the sudden tightness in my chest. He smirked, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face, as if he'd just landed a winning shot. "Let's not be dramatic, Arya. We're releasing you from your position, effective immediately." No warning, no performance review, no acknowledgement that my department had just delivered a 12% revenue spike, the highest in 3 years. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands to keep them steady. "May I ask why?" His eyes narrowed, as if my composure irritated him. "You lack vision," he said, the words dripping with condescension. "You manage tasks, not people, and let's be honest, this industry demands strong leadership, assertiveness, and confidence, traits you haven't exactly shown." There it was, not even subtle, a jab at my gender, wrapped in corporate jargon. He didn't see me as a leader, not because I hadn't delivered, but because I didn't strut or shout like he did. I nodded slowly, letting his words hang in the air. "I understand," I said, my voice neutral, unshaken. Martin's brow furrowed, clearly expecting tears or outrage. "I'll need your badge and company laptop by the end of the day," he added, regaining his stride. "Access will be disabled by 5 p.m. HR has your severance details." I stood, extending my hand. "Thank you, Martin. I appreciate the clarity." He hesitated, then shook it, his grip firm, dismissive. "Good luck out there," he said, turning on his heel and striding out, satisfied with his little victory. I sat back down, exhaling slowly. My hands didn't tremble, my heart didn't race. Instead, a strange lightness settled over me. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, my father, smiling at the ribbon cutting for the company's first office, his dream realized. I ran my fingers along the frame's edge. "You told me to wait, Dad," I whispered, "until the time was right." I packed a few items, a mug from my team, a notebook of ideas Martin had ignored, and left the office. Co-workers' sympathetic glances followed me, but I offered only a polite smile. As I stepped into the Chicago sunlight, the weight of 15 years slipped off my shoulders. I pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer, "It's time. Prepare everything." Martin thought he'd ended my story. He had no idea I was about to rewrite his. 2 weeks before Martin's smug dismissal, I sat in a quiet office, 5 miles from Chicago's glittering skyline, staring at an envelope that held my future. My father's handwriting adorned the front. "Arya, open on your 35th birthday," a command laced with his love for theatrics. The air felt heavy, expectant, as if the room itself knew what was coming. Mr. Harrington, our family lawyer, watched me with a fatherly warmth, his eyes hinting at secrets he couldn't yet share. I traced the envelope's edge, my heart stirring with a mix of curiosity and reverence. Whatever lay inside, it was my father's final gift, and I was ready to receive it. The clock struck noon, and my 35th birthday officially began. I slit the envelope with care, revealing a handwritten letter and a formal document with embossed seals. I unfolded the letter first, my father's neat script pulling me into his voice. "Arya," it began, "if you're reading this, you're 35, and you're ready. I never doubted it, not for a second. You've worked twice as hard for half the recognition, and I saw it all. The sacrifices, the integrity no one noticed." My throat tightened as I read on. He wrote of the company he'd founded, how it had changed after his death 5 years ago, growing colder, more ruthless. "I knew a time might come when you'd need more than a seat at the table," he continued. "So I gave you the table." I paused, my hands trembling slightly, and turned to the document. It was a trust agreement, notarized and airtight, stating that 90% of the company's shares, my father's stake when he stepped down, had been placed in my name, held until this day. Full voting rights were activated immediately. I read it twice, then once more, the numbers searing into my mind. 90%. I wasn't just a shareholder. I was the majority owner, the controlling force of the company that had just cast me aside. A buzz of disbelief coursed through me, not just at the power, but at my father's foresight. He'd known I'd face men like Martin, men who'd underestimate me, and he'd armed me for this moment. "Is this real?" I asked Mr. Harrington, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his smile soft but certain. "It's real, Arya. Your father structured the trust to avoid public filings. The board has no idea unless you choose to tell them." I leaned back, the weight of his words settling in. "Why wait until now?" I asked. Harrington's eyes met mine. "He wanted you to experience the company first, to see who would reveal themselves, to decide if you wanted it before you claimed it." The words hit like a revelation. My years of being overlooked, of watching Martin take credit for my ideas, of smiling through subtle slights, they weren't wasted. They were my father's test, and I'd passed. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my purse. "Let's talk about what comes next," I said, my voice steadier now. Harrington raised an eyebrow. "You're not rushing in?" I shook my head, a plan forming. "Not yet. I need the right moment." That night, alone in my apartment, I reread the letter under the soft glow of a lamp. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the Chicago skyline in the distance. My father had believed in me, not just as his daughter, but as his successor. The company wasn't just his legacy, it was mine to reclaim. I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet power he'd entrusted to me, and knew I'd wait for Martin to overplay his hand. He thought he controlled the game, but I held the board. The next day I called Harrington again. "Prepare the documents for a shareholder meeting," I said, "but don't notify the board yet." There was a pause. "What are you planning, Arya?" he asked. I looked out at the city, its towers glinting like a promise. "I'm planning to walk into that boardroom," I said calmly, "and show them exactly who they tried to erase." The line went quiet, but I could sense his approval. The pieces were in place, and I was ready to play my part, not with Martin's bluster, but with my father's vision, sharp and undeniable. The days after my firing were a study in silence, but not the kind that signals defeat. It was the quiet of a chess player plotting 5 moves ahead, each step deliberate, each piece positioned with care. Chicago's loop buzzed around me as I sat in a corner booth of a discreet cafe, the clink of coffee cups fading into the background. Across from me, Mr. Harrington slid a draft of the shareholder meeting request across the table, its pages crisp with possibility. My phone buzzed with HR's insistent calls about an exit interview, but I ignored them. Martin thought he'd written my ending. I was busy crafting his. The document was simple, a formal notice to call a special shareholder meeting with one agenda item, leadership review. Harrington, leadership review and appointment of new executive management. It was a legal grenade, and I held the pin. "You're sure you're ready?" Harrington asked, adjusting his glasses. "Once you submit this, there's no going back." I met his gaze, my voice steady. They pulled the pin when they fired me. He nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. We set the timeline, Notice served Friday, meeting on Tuesday, giving the board 2 days to scramble. Perfect. Next, I met Caroline Winters, the trustee who'd guarded my father's shares since his passing. Her office, tucked in a quiet Chicago suburb, was a shrine to precision. Files neatly stacked, not a paper out of place. "I've watched Martin dismantle your father's legacy," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Inside were the numbers I needed. Employee satisfaction down 38%, turnover up 47%, $2 million in unauthorized executive perks, and flat revenue despite a booming market. Martin's leadership was a house of cards, propped up by inflated projections. "If this continues," Caroline said flatly, "he'll tank the company in 2 years." I nodded, absorbing every detail. The truth would be my weapon, sharp and indisputable. Back in my apartment, I pored over the data, cross-referencing employee surveys with financial audits. Martin's signature was on every misstep: lavish trips, bonuses for loyalists, reports that glossed over cracks in the foundation. My father had built this company on people, not numbers, and Martin had betrayed that. I jotted notes, my handwriting as deliberate as my plan. The board would see the evidence, and Martin would have nowhere to hide. My phone pinged with texts from former colleagues. "What happened? Did you quit?" "Martin's acting like nothing's wrong." I didn't reply. Let him bask in his false security. Let him underestimate me one last time. That evening, I stood before my mirror, slipping into a navy suit I'd bought for a promotion that never came. It fit perfectly, tailored to command a room. I practiced my opening lines, not a speech, but a scalpel. Precise, measured, undeniable. "I'm not here as an employee," I rehearsed, my reflection steady. "I'm here as the majority shareholder." The words felt like armor, forged by my father's trust. I imagined Martin's face, his confidence crumbling, and allowed myself a small smile. The city sparkled beyond my window, Lake Michigan a dark mirror to my resolve. By Monday, the office was abuzz with rumors. "Arya's gone. Did she screw up?" Martin, I heard, was louder than ever, parading his authority like a peacock. Good. The higher he climbed, the harder he'd fall. I met Harrington again, finalizing the documents. "They'll be served tomorrow," he said. "By Tuesday, you'll be in that boardroom." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Caroline's folder sat on my table, a testament to Martin's failures. I added my touch, a timeline of my contributions, ideas he'd dismissed, successes he'd claimed. The board would see who'd truly driven the company forward. As I lay in bed, the city's hum a distant lullaby, I thought of my father. He'd known this day would come, had prepared me for it with every lesson, every quiet nod of pride. The whiteboard in the engineering bullpen flashed in my mind, a phrase I hadn't yet seen but would soon inspire. She came back. I closed my eyes, not with anger or fear, but with certainty. Martin had swung first, but I'd deliver the final blow, not with his noise, but with my truth, honed and ready. The Chicago skyline glittered through the boardroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, a silent witness to the storm about to break. I stood by the elevators, smoothing the navy suit that felt like a second skin, my father's trust documents tucked under my arm like a shield. Tuesday morning had arrived, crisp and cool, and the 50th floor boardroom hummed with unsuspecting voices. Martin's confident drawl carried through the frosted glass, oblivious to the reckoning I'd prepared over sleepless nights. Mr. Harrington met me with a nod, his expression calm but electric. "They're in there," he whispered. I took a slow breath, my heart steady. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the moment I'd claim what was mine. The boardroom door opened with a soft click, and heads turned. Martin, mid-sentence about quarterly projections, froze, his eyes narrowing as I stepped inside. "Arya," he said, his voice sharp with disbelief. "This is a board meeting. Employees aren't permitted." I smiled politely, setting the ownership documents on the polished oak table. "Exactly," I replied, taking the head chair with deliberate ease. The silence was absolute, a vacuum of shock. Board members exchanged glances, some stiffening, others leaning forward. Mr. Dalton, a silver-haired veteran from my father's era, adjusted his glasses, sensing the shift. I'm not here as an employee, I continued, my voice clear, unshaken. I'm here as the majority shareholder. The words landed like a thunderclap. Martin's jaw tightened, confusion giving way to scorn. You can't be serious, he scoffed, but I held his gaze unflinching. It's quite serious, I said, nodding to Harrington, who handed a copy of the ownership certificate to the board secretary. As of my 35th birthday, 90% of the company's shares were transferred to me through a family trust. All paperwork is notarized, filed, and compliant with corporate governance. Mr. Dalton scanned the document, his eyebrows rising. Is this accurate? He asked, voice measured. It is, I replied. My father trusted me to oversee his legacy, and he knew what this company could become without oversight. The room stilled, the weight of my words unmistakable. Martin's face flushed. This is absurd, he snapped, standing now. Why would your father? Because he saw what you couldn't, I interrupted, my tone firm but calm. He saw competence, not bravado. I opened the second folder, sliding a financial report across the table. Let's talk performance, I said. The numbers spoke louder than any shout. Employee satisfaction down 38%, turnover up 47%, $2 million in misused funds, unauthorized travel, executive bonuses, all signed by Martin. I've compiled testimony from department heads, employee surveys, and audits, I continued, my voice steady as board members flipped through pages. Misleading investor reports, ignored discrimination complaints, and a flattening revenue trajectory in a booming market, all under your leadership, Martin. He slammed a hand on the table, his charm unraveling. You're twisting data for a personal vendetta. I met his glare unshaken. I don't need to twist anything. You relied on no one powerful enough to question you. That ends today. The CFO whispered urgently to the general counsel, who began typing. Mr. Dalton looked disturbed, his faith in Martin visibly cracking. I pulled the final document. As the majority shareholder, I'm submitting a motion to remove Martin Rhee as CEO, effective immediately. My 90% ownership carries the vote. The board secretary blinked, stunned. You don't need a second? I own 90%, I said simply. Mr. Dalton cleared his throat. Per company bylaws, the motion stands. Martin's face twisted, rage, disbelief, defeat. He didn't resist, but his exit was a storm, the door slamming behind him. I exhaled, the room's energy shifting to me. He hadn't looked powerful leaving. He looked small, a shadow of the titan he'd played. I turned to the board, my voice steady. This company deserves better. So do its people. Starting today, that's what they'll get. Mr. Dalton nodded, a faint smile forming. Welcome back, Arya. The words carried weight, not just for me, but for the legacy I'd reclaimed. I gathered my documents, the skyline still watching, and felt my Otetz's hand on my shoulder, guiding me forward. Martin was gone, but my work was just beginning. The boardroom, once his stage, was now mine, not for conquest, but for restoration. The conference hall buzzed with cautious hope, a sea of faces, engineers, interns, custodians, watching me at the podium. It was Monday, a week after I'd turned Martin's world upside down, and the air felt different, like a room aired out after years of staleness. I'd called every employee to this all-hands meeting, not to flaunt my victory, but to rebuild what he'd broken. My father's company deserved its soul back, and I stood alone, no notes, no slides, just the truth I'd carried for 15 years. Their eyes held questions, doubts, and flickers of trust. I was ready to earn the rest. Some of you know me, I began, my voice clear, carrying to the back of the Chicago hall. Some only know what you've been told, but let me start with this. I didn't come to take power, I came to restore trust. Heads tilted, murmurs fading. Last week I was fired, I said, a faint smile breaking the tension. Told I wasn't what this company needed, that I lacked the leadership to shape its future. Nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. I didn't fight back then, because leadership isn't about volume or vanity. It's about vision, respect, and lifting the people who do the work. I stepped from the podium, closer to the front row, locking eyes with familiar faces, engineers I'd brainstormed with, assistants long overlooked. For years, this company ran on your ideas, your late nights, your belief in something bigger. Somewhere, that got lost. Starting today, we change that. The room was silent, but it was a listening silence, alive with possibility. I outlined my plan: open feedback, promotions based on merit, and a culture where no one's voice was drowned out. Heads nodded, skepticism softening into hope. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something radical. I listened. I met with department heads in corner offices, team leads in cramped cubicles, and interns in the break room. I sat with receptionists and custodial staff, asking what wasn't working, what they needed, and who deserved more. Their answers painted a vivid picture: a company stifled by fear, where talent like Maya, a customer service star, languished while her manager took credit. I promoted Maya to head of client experience, a role she'd already mastered unofficially. Kevin, a brilliant product developer who'd quit under Martin's neglect, returned after a single call from me, his eyes bright with purpose. HR was my next target. I read every buried complaint: discrimination, favoritism, ignored pleas for fairness. Several mid-level managers, Martin's loyalists who'd fostered toxicity, were quietly let go. In their place, I launched the People First Initiative, a program my father had once sketched in a notebook I'd kept. It rewarded innovation, fostered collaboration, and broke glass ceilings. No more whisper networks, just open doors. I watched the company transform. Desks sprouted photos, plants, and personality. Laughter echoed in the break room, where once only hushed complaints lived. One evening, I walked the halls alone, the Chicago skyline a soft glow beyond the windows. Near the engineering bullpen, a whiteboard caught my eye. In blue marker, someone had scrawled, "She came back," underlined twice. I stood there, the words sinking in. Not she won, not she fired Martin, but she came back. It was more than a title, it was a promise kept. I moved into the CEO's office the next day, not for the bigger desk, but because it was time. The nameplate read, Aria Bennett, Chief Executive Officer, simple and sleek. I placed my father's photo in the corner, a snapshot from the company's opening, both of us smiling, hopeful. The office felt like a continuation, not a conquest. My father's portrait hung on the wall, not as a monument, but a reminder of why I was here. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began reviewing proposals from teams I'd empowered. The energy was softer now, brighter. People stayed late because they wanted to, not out of fear. Maya stopped, now leading with quiet confidence, dropped by with a report, her eyes sparkling. "The team's ideas are flowing," she said. I smiled, feeling my father's hand on my shoulder, guiding me still. This wasn't just a company, it was a home, and I'd brought it back to life. A year ago, I walked out of this Chicago tower with a cardboard box and a polite smile, dismissed as a cog in a machine I was destined to steer. Today, I stepped through the same glass doors, a tailored suit hugging my frame, a leather folder under my arm, and the company's future resting on my shoulders. The lobby hummed with life, employees nodding hello, their faces bright with purpose. The receptionist stood as I entered, her grin warm. "Morning, Ms. Bennett," she called. "Aria, please," I said, smiling back. "We're all on the same team." The elevator chimed softly, carrying me to the top floor, where I'd turned my father's dream into reality. The CEO's office was no longer Martin's domain but mine, though I'd kept its bones, the walnut desk, the broad windows framing Chicago's skyline. What changed were the walls, now lined with photos of our people, team retreats, product launches led by names once ignored, moments of joy captured in candid frames. Behind my chair hung my father's portrait, his steady gaze a quiet reminder of why I was here. I sat down, opened my laptop, and reviewed the quarterly report. The numbers sang: revenue up 23%, employee retention up 41%, customer satisfaction soaring, all achieved not through shortcuts but through ethics, collaboration, and transparency. My father would have been proud. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called. Maya, now head of client experience, stepped inside, her glasses glinting with the same spark I'd seen in her first report. "You ready?" she asked. They're waiting in the conference room. I smoothed my blazer and stood. Let's do it. The boardroom felt transformed, not by decor but by presence. Half the board were women, several under 40, their questions sharp, their ideas bold. Richard Tanaka, our new strategic advisor, sat at the table's center, his calm intellect a nod to the kind of leader my father admired. Before we began, Richard gestured to me. Arya has a few words. I hadn't planned to speak, but standing there, every eye on me, not with judgment, but respect, I felt the weight of my father's trust. Thank you all, I said, my voice steady, warm, for believing in change, for making hard decisions when easy ones were safer, for helping rebuild a company that puts people before power. I paused, letting the words settle. Someone once said I lacked leadership, but leadership isn't about volume or titles. It's about vision, accountability, and the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. My father built this company on those values. I'm proud we're living up to them again. A quiet beat, then applause, soft, genuine, the kind that lingers in your bones. That afternoon, I took the long way back to my office, weaving through departments like I used to when I was just another face. I high-fived marketing interns buzzing over their first big campaign, laughed with developers debugging code, and paused to hear an engineer's pitch. In the break room, someone had baked cupcakes for an intern's last day. I grabbed one, sat among them, and talked about nothing important for 20 minutes. Movies, weekend plans, the Cubs' latest game. It felt like family, a place where people belonged, not just worked. Back in my office, I stood by the window, Lake Michigan stretching beyond the city's edge. The whiteboard message from months ago echoed in my mind. She came back, but now it was more. I hadn't just returned, I'd built something better. My father's photo sat on my desk, his smile mirroring mine from that opening day long ago. I didn't feel triumph or vengeance, just peace, a quiet certainty that I'd honored his legacy. This company wasn't mine to conquer, it was mine to nurture, to grow with the people who made it breathe. As the skyline glowed, I sat back down, ready for tomorrow, knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be.